Leo Thorne lived on the quiet end of Willow Creek, a street that was quickly becoming an artifact of a bygone era. His property, a modest two-story house with a large, unkempt backyard, was the final, stubborn green square pressed up against the relentless, vertical ambition of the city's newest financial district expansion. For months, the colossal steel skeleton of the Sterling Tower, a 50-story monument to capital gains, had blocked his morning sun, the construction noise a jackhammered soundtrack to his life. Leo tolerated it, clinging to the solace of his property lines, the last tangible boundary between his quiet existence and their aggressive, corporate world. The fence, an old chain-link relic tangled with Virginia creeper, had always felt like a solid, if low-tech, barrier. It had kept out neighborhood dogs and children. It was supposed to keep out the world. He woke on Friday morning not to the usual clang of girders, but to a dull, rhythmic thump, 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 and the high-pitched, insistent beep, beep, beep of heavy machinery in reverse. It was too close. The noise wasn't coming from the Sterling site. It was coming from inside his perimeter. Leo sprang out of bed, adrenaline instantly flooding his system, replacing the hazy peace of sleep with cold dread. He threw on a faded t-shirt and sweatpants, his bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor, and strode to the kitchen door that opened onto the backyard. He stopped, his hand freezing on the handle. The world outside the glass had changed, where a sprawling, overgrown lawn, a single apple tree, and a decaying wooden picnic bench had stood just yesterday. There was now a smooth, charcoal gray expanse. The rich, earthy smell of soil and dew was gone, replaced by the acrid chemical tang of fresh asphalt millings, coarse gravel pressed flat and hard. The apple tree was reduced to a stump, flush with the ground. And worst of all, perfectly straight, newly painted white lines crisscrossed the entire space. His backyard, his private refuge, was a parking lot, and it was already occupied. A massive, muddy construction skip sat squarely on what had been the site of his picnic bench. Two white, beat-up pickup trucks, bearing the logo of Sterling Development, were parked neatly in numbered spots. Leo didn't scream. He didn't curse. The violation was too total, too immediate for an outward reaction. It was an internal implosion, a sudden, sharp intake of breath that felt like breathing glass. It wasn't just trespass. It was erasure. They hadn't just parked on his land. They had consumed it, digested it, and spat it out as a piece of corporate infrastructure. He wrenched the door open and stepped out onto the cold, gritty surface. A man in a fluorescent yellow vest, clipboard in hand, looked up from his phone. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with a smug, bored expression. "Morning," the man said, waving a dismissive hand. "You must be the neighbor. Just keep your dog inside, okay? We're operational now." "Operational?" Leo's voice was a low, dangerous growl. "This is my property. You are trespassing. Get this garbage and those trucks off my land immediately." The young man, Marcus Vance, as the embroidered name on his vest read, sighed dramatically and tucked the phone into his pocket. He sauntered closer, stopping just outside the painted lines. The gesture was calculated. "This is the sacred space now, not yours. Look, Mr. Thorne, right? We knew the old survey lines were a little fuzzy on this end. The original lot for the tower was too small for the required overflow parking, and the construction team needed quick, segregated access. So, we temporarily reassigned this small section of, let's be honest, unused space. Saves us hundreds of thousands in off-site rentals." Marcus paused, his expression shifting from patronizing to pitying. "It's Friday. It'll all be sorted Monday. In the meantime, I'm authorized to offer you a courtesy fee. Say, $200 for the inconvenience this weekend? Cash." Leo felt a surge of heat rush up his neck. "This isn't unused space, Mr. Vance. It's my home. There is no inconvenience. There is theft. Criminal trespass. You flattened my tree. You paved my yard. You have 45 minutes to remove the millings, the paint, the skip, and yourselves, or I call the police." Marcus laughed, a short, dry, utterly contemptuous sound. "Go ahead, call them. You think I didn't clear this? We're Sterling Corp, Leo. We have a team of 5 people whose only job is to get ahead of the calls you're about to make." Zoning will tell you it's a dispute over boundary markers. The police will tell you it's a civil matter. By the time a judge even looks at the emergency filing your lawyer makes, which, let's be real, you don't have, it'll be next week. And by then, we'll be done with the main structural work, and we'll figure out a long-term solution. A real solution. A buyout, maybe. You know? A price you can't refuse. Vance pulled a crisp wad of cash from his wallet, counted out $200, and dropped it deliberately onto the gray gravel. Have a nice weekend, Leo. Don't step on the paint. He turned and walked back toward the skip. Already back on his phone, the incident dismissed, closed, and filed away. Leo stood there, the sound of the young man's humming fading as he stared at the money. The $200 was an insult that felt heavier than the construction skip. It was a declaration that his ownership, his peace, his entire claim to privacy was worth less than a Friday night dinner. The next 6 hours were a blur of escalating, impotent rage. Leo did everything Vance had predicted. He called 911. "It's a property line dispute, sir. We can't dispatch." He called the city planning office. "Our system shows the adjacent developer has temporary permits for overflow staging. The exact boundary is pending a formal resurvey." He called the single property lawyer he knew. "It's Friday, Leo. I can draft a cease and desist first thing Monday, but injunctions take days. This is classic corporate bullying." By 2 p.m., Leo was slumped at his kitchen table, the $200 still sitting untouched on the gravel outside, now partially obscured by the shadow of a brand-new, metallic blue BMW that had pulled into spot number 7. The Sterling Tower employees were arriving for a mandatory weekend team summit. The parking lot was filling up. He watched the people through the window, his vision tunneling. They were young professionals, laughing, carrying branded Sterling Corp canvas bags, oblivious. They stepped out of their luxury cars, Audis, Teslas, Range Rovers, onto his former lawn, their expensive leather shoes crunching the gravel. The sound was nails on a chalkboard. They slammed their doors, their voices ringing with the self-important confidence of people who believed the entire world was their amenity. The realization hit him like a cold stone. They weren't even seeing a yard. They saw a place to abandon their machines for the day. They were using his boundaries to define their convenience. Saturday was worse. The parking lot was full by 9 a.m. Music, a relentless, synthesized dance beat, was pumping from the Sterling Tower's upper floors. The parking lot was now active. People lingered, smoking, taking phone calls, their voices invading the quiet space of his house. The sun rose and baked the black gravel, amplifying the acrid smell into a choking miasma. At 11 a.m., Leo stepped outside to empty a small trash can, only to find a plastic Starbucks cup and a crumpled receipt wedged beneath his front porch steps. A small thing, maybe, but it was the final indignity. The casual assumption of ownership. He saw Marcus Vance directing traffic near the back corner. "Vance!" Leo yelled, his voice hoarse from lack of use and raw anger. Vance turned, looking annoyed. "Still here, Leo? Look, I told you Monday. That cup? That trash? You told me not to step on the paint. I'm telling you, you do not leave a single piece of refuse on my property. This is still private land. You are still criminals. Cry me a river. I'll send a sweeper over Monday." Vance adjusted his earpiece. "Look, I have a job to do. I'm coordinating 75 vehicles here. If you're going to be a nuisance, I'll have security escort you inside." Leo stepped onto the gravel, his fists shaking. "You will not enter my house. You will not threaten me. You have taken my land. You have destroyed my property, and the law is too slow to stop you." Vance smiled, a wide, predatory flash of perfect capped teeth. "Then, Leo, it looks like you're powerless." The word powerless was the catalyst. It echoed the helpless feeling of watching his world be paved over, the fury of lawyers who only cared about Monday, the indifference of the police. Leo went back inside. He didn't come out for the rest of the day. He walked through his house, now a silent, dark cage overlooking a noisy, glaring intrusion. He ate a cold sandwich. He watched the headlights sweep his living room wall as the last of the employees left at 9 p.m. The silence that followed was not peace. It was the heavy, malevolent silence of a waiting battlefield. He looked out at the lot. It was full. Every single painted white box was occupied, expensive metal gleaming under the sodium vapor lights Sterling had erected on his land. The cars were beautiful, sleek, and entirely oblivious. They were the physical embodiments of the arrogance that had stolen his space. They were the trophies of the invasion. He saw a dark, silver Porsche 911 in spot 12. Its tires were a few inches over the line, pressing into the small, surviving sliver of dirt near the old fence line where the creeper vine still clung to life. Leo walked to the tool shed. The shed was Leo's other refuge, a place where he repaired, tinkered, and restored. It contained hammers, saws, wrenches, and a small, rarely used walk-behind trencher. It was meant for laying irrigation pipe or... The trenching machine coughed, sputtered, and died, a mechanical beast having spent its fury. Leo Thorne stood in the cold, gray, pre-dawn light, his clothes damp with sweat and coated in fine, pulverized rock dust. His ears rang with the ghost of the engine's roar. The smell of gasoline and churned earth was intoxicating, a perfume of hard-won victory. He surveyed his creation. 45 luxury vehicles, Porsches, Teslas, Audi Q8s, and even one canary yellow McLaren belonging to the infamous CEO, Desmond Sterling III, who had flown in late Saturday night, sat marooned. Each car was an island in a sea of fresh gravel, encircled by a precise 2-foot-deep, 6-inch-wide perimeter ditch. The sheer, uncompromising geometry of the trenches defined a new truth. These cars, and by extension their owners, were trapped. The only way out was up, or through the trench, which would instantly destroy a tire, shatter an alloy rim, and beach the vehicle's undercarriage. Leo wiped a streak of oily dust from his cheek. He had worked through the long night, his focus absolute, the rhythmic violence of the trencher a grim meditation. He felt exhausted, yes, but also lighter than he had in months. The crushing weight of his powerlessness had been transferred into the cold, hard fact of the trenches. He had replaced their illegal white lines with his own undeniable geological boundaries. He pushed the defunct trencher back toward the shed, moving slowly, his muscles burning with lactic acid. As he reached his back door, the sky over the city's concrete canyons began to lighten, catching the mirrored glass of the Sterling Tower and throwing a blinding, arrogant glare across his paved yard. And then, the first person arrived. It wasn't Marcus Vance. It was a woman, early 30s, impeccably dressed in a tailored cream suit, clutching a leather laptop bag. She pulled her company Audi into the empty corner of the lot. Oblivious until she spotted the scene, she stopped dead, phone to her ear, then slowly looked up, her expression shifting from confusion to cold horror. She lowered the phone, took 3 steps toward her car, a sleek black Tesla in spot 27, and then saw the chasm. Her foot stopped mid-air, a millimeter from the edge of the abyss. A single high-pitched scream sliced the quiet morning. Within minutes, the trickle became a stream, and the stream, a flood. The corporate summit attendees were arriving for their final mandatory Sunday meeting. They were greeted by a scene of utter industrial devastation. Horns blared. Doors slammed. Confused, angry shouts echoed off the walls of the surrounding buildings. Leo stood at his kitchen window, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the surreal spectacle unfold. It was a perfect microcosm of his initial violation, order replaced by chaos, the smooth convenience of wealth encountering the rough, intractable reality of the earth. Marcus Vance was the next to arrive, screeching to a halt in his yellow vest near the entrance, already shouting into his radio before he even got out of the truck. When he finally laid eyes on the spectacle, the perfect, deadly ring of trenches, the bewildered, frantic executives pacing around their mobile prisons, his face went white, then mottled purple with pure, incandescent fury. He spotted Leo's open kitchen door. "Thorne!" Vance's roar was loud enough to vibrate the glass. "You maniac! What in God's name did you do?" Leo stepped outside, deliberately moving to the center of the gravel lot, planting his feet firmly in the exact middle of what Sterling had tried to claim. He spoke calmly, projecting his voice over the rising din of the crowd. I enforced my property line, Mr. Vance. You said I was powerless. I have defined the boundary between my private property and your temporary staging area. These cars are perfectly parked within the white lines you created. The only difference is now those lines have real meaning. Vance vaulted one of the smaller trenches near a dumpster, landing awkwardly and scraping his knee. He didn't notice the blood. He stabbed a furious finger at the nearest ditch. This is willful destruction of property. Criminal damage! You've ruined hundreds of thousands of dollars of asphalt. Asphalt? Leo asked, raising an eyebrow. You told me yesterday this was millings and coarse gravel applied on a temporary permit. I simply removed the gravel from the lines you painted. The soil underneath, Mr. Vance, is my soil. And digging a drainage ditch on one's own private land is not criminal damage. It's land maintenance. I was worried about runoff after you covered everything. This was pure, improvised legal audacity, but Leo delivered it with the calm, dead-eyed certainty of a man who had already passed his point of no return. Vance pulled out his phone, his hand shaking. You're done. I'm calling Desmond Sterling III. He's here, and he's going to crucify you. Minutes later, a tall, immaculately suited man with gelled silver hair and a perpetual sneer emerged from the Sterling Tower's ground floor. This was Desmond Sterling III, the CEO, whose McLaren sat trapped in Spot 1. Sterling was not a man accustomed to having his Sunday morning disrupted, least of all by a nuisance neighbor. He took one look at his $300,000 sports car sitting on its little gravel island, then at the dirt-crusted, defiant man standing in the middle of the carnage, and his voice, though low, carried the chilling weight of absolute authority. Vance, I want a police report filed for felony vandalism and reckless endangerment. I want a towing company on site with a crane in 30 minutes. And I want this hobo arrested and removed from the property. I don't care about permits. This is a safety hazard and a catastrophic loss of operational time. Vance scrambled, dialing numbers, his tone shifting to desperate servitude. Suddenly, a loud, clear voice cut through the corporate panic. I wouldn't advise that. Mr. Sterling, a woman in a neat gray jacket and khakis, not an employee, not a cop, but carrying a heavy-duty tripod and a large camera with a telephoto lens, had walked onto the lot. She was followed by a nervous-looking man holding a microphone. I'm Sarah Neidhart, Channel 12 News, she said, her voice bright and professional. We received an anonymous tip about a mass vehicle hostage situation stemming from an alleged corporate land grab. Are you the property owner, sir? She directed the question to Leo. Leo looked directly into the lens. I am. And I simply re-established the boundaries of my private residence that Sterling Development illegally paved over and utilized without permission or compensation. The cameras started rolling, the red light glowing, instantly transforming the property dispute into a public trial. Desmond Sterling III, recognizing the immediate threat of bad press, stopped his orders mid-sentence. He approached Neidhart, putting on a sickeningly smooth, practiced corporate smile. Ms. Neidhart, this is a grotesque overreaction by a deeply disturbed individual. We had a verbal, temporary agreement, which this man breached in a violent and dangerous way. We will have the vehicle safely moved and the property restored by tomorrow. Leo interjected sharply, pointing a finger at the trenches. No, you won't. And it's not just a land grab, Ms. Neidhart. You need to see what they covered up. Sterling's smile faltered, a flicker of genuine fear passing through his eyes. Don't listen to him. He's unstable. Leo ignored the CEO, turning his attention to a specific trench, the one circling Desmond Sterling's own McLaren. The trencher blade had chewed through more than just gravel and clay here. It had exposed something pale, old and ceramic. When they paved my yard, they paved over my old utility lines. But look here, Leo said, kneeling and pointing to the fresh cut. They paved over this. He reached into the trench and pulled out a section of thick, brittle, glazed clay pipe, broken cleanly by the machine. The inside was thick with sediment and root hairs. That, Ms. Neidhart, Leo stated, holding the broken pipe high for the camera, is part of the Willow Creek Municipal Storm Drain System. Installed in 1958, it runs the length of my southern boundary. Under city and federal code, you cannot pave, obstruct, or place a permanent structure over a primary municipal drainage easement without specific recorded permits and a rerouting plan. When Mr. Vance said the survey lines were fuzzy, what he meant was Sterling Development deliberately ignored a major easement to fit their parking lot. The camera zoomed in on the pipe in Leo's hand. Sarah Neithart's eyes widened. She turned to Desmond Sterling III, whose face was now a mask of pure, murderous panic. "Mr. Sterling? Did Sterling Development pave over a municipal storm drain line without filing a rerouting plan?" Sterling stammered, his executive polish cracking. That's ridiculous. It's a decorative gutter. It's irrelevant to the structural integrity of the tower." "It's a desperate lie!" Marcus Vance, listening on his radio, was suddenly speaking in hushed, frantic tones to someone on the other end, his panic palpable even from 20 feet away. Leo stood up, brushing the dirt from his hands, and addressed the camera with a calm intensity that felt far more menacing than any shouting. "The trenches I dug run precisely parallel to the old municipal easement markers. I was not damaging a parking lot. I was exposing an illegal obstruction. I was ensuring that in the event of heavy rain, the water would not back up into the neighborhood, which would have been the inevitable result of Sterling's shortcut." The narrative had instantly flipped. Leo Thorne was no longer a vandal. He was a civic protector. The news crew immediately recognized the gravity of the potential scandal, a major financial corporation illegally paving over public utilities to save money, only to be stopped by one man with a trenching machine. The silence following the violent shudder of the crashed McLaren was profound. It felt less like a Sunday morning and more like the end of the world. Desmond Sterling III, his silver hair now disheveled, his suit dusty, slowly unlatched his seatbelt. He didn't look at the ruin of his car. He didn't look at the news camera. He looked at Leo Thorne, his eyes alight with a cold, clear, unadulterated hatred that transcended property lines or corporate strategy. Sterling emerged from the car's passenger side, stepping delicately over the edge of the trench. His head of security, ignoring the shouts of the news reporter, hustled him away toward the relative safety of the tower lobby. The police arrived moments later, followed by two white, official-looking trucks labeled Willow Creek Public Works. For a few tense moments, the senior police officer, Sergeant Mills, wavered, looking at the 45 stranded cars and the dirt-caked trencher near Leo's shed. The initial report was clear: armed vandalism in progress. "Mr. Thorne," Sergeant Mills said, approaching Leo slowly, his hand resting on his service belt. "We have multiple reports of felony vandalism. Are you claiming responsibility for the creation of these ditches?" Leo stood his ground, maintaining eye contact. "I am, and as a homeowner, I am entitled to maintain proper drainage on my property. My actions were a necessary measure to expose and prevent a catastrophic failure of public infrastructure illegally covered by the Sterling Development Corporation." He pointed to the broken clay pipe still sitting near the McLaren. "That pipe is city property. They paved over it. They violated a known easement. The Public Works Director, a stout, serious woman named Janice Halliday, marched straight past the police and the stranded executives. She saw the pipe, her eyes widening, and immediately pulled out a tablet, cross-referencing the location with digital maps. Her silence was more damning than any accusation. After 30 seconds of intense, hushed consultation with her team, Halliday snapped her tablet shut. She walked over to Sergeant Mills, her face grim. "Sergeant, the pipe is exactly where Mr. Thorne says it is. It is the main overflow for the 1958 Southern Willow storm drain, a critical public utility. Sterling Development not only paved over the easement without filing a rerouting plan, but the weight of the gravel and the subsequent traffic could have caused the pipe to collapse, backing up sewage and water into the entire low-lying residential grid in the event of a major storm." She turned to face the Sterling employees, her voice booming with official authority. "By the power vested in the Willow Creek Department of Public Works, I am issuing an immediate indefinite stop work order on the Sterling Tower. Furthermore, as Sterling Development has created an unpermitted immediate hazard to public infrastructure, they are in direct violation of Municipal Code 4.7.1. No activity related to this project, including the removal of any vehicles from the area currently classified as private property, is authorized until a full structural and utility compliance audit has been completed by the city. The legal earthquake had struck. It wasn't just Leo's backyard that was paralyzed. It was the 50-story, multi-million-dollar Sterling Tower. The stranded executives watched in stunned horror as their CEO's arrogance had not only crippled their vehicles but had shut down their entire flagship operation. Sergeant Mills holstered his service belt. He looked at the chaos, then back at Leo, now a hero in the eyes of city bureaucracy. "Mr. Thorne, for the time being, you are not under arrest, but I need you to stay put. This area is now a crime scene, or rather, a massive municipal violation scene. Those trenches cannot be filled without express permission from Public Works." Leo simply nodded. The police set up bright yellow caution tape around the perimeter of the entire lot, including the skip, the trucks, and the trenches, formally seizing the scene. The next 48 hours were a dizzying blur of media frenzy and bureaucratic warfare. Leo became an overnight sensation. The trench warrior, the man who stopped the tower. Local news ran continuous loops of Sterling's McLaren plunging into the trench. By Monday afternoon, the city had placed a permanent, heavy wooden barricade across the entrance to the parking lot. The stranded cars remained, dusty monuments to corporate hubris. At 3 p.m. on Monday, a black, unmarked sedan pulled up outside Leo's front yard, the small, untrenched area near the street. Two figures emerged, Marcus Vance looking thoroughly defeated and miserable, and a woman who commanded the air around her. She was in her late 40s, dressed in a charcoal pantsuit that looked tailored from woven granite. She wore no badge or identification, but her posture radiated the kind of high-level authority that cost thousands of dollars per hour. This was Alara Kincaid, Desmond Sterling III's personal counsel. Vance knocked. Leo opened the door, deliberately leaving the safety chain on. "Mr. Thorne," Vance started, his voice strained and submissive. "This is Attorney Kincaid. We need to speak." Kincaid didn't wait. She projected her voice with chilling clarity through the small gap. "Mr. Thorne, let us dispense with the dramatics. The city's stop-work order is inconvenient but temporary. They care about the pipe. I care about the 45 executives you have maliciously imprisoned and the $4.5 million in combined vehicle damage and business losses you have inflicted." She produced a thick, neatly bound legal document from her briefcase. "You believe you have the moral high ground because you exposed an easement violation. We concede that point to the city. But you also chose to employ a weaponized piece of industrial equipment to purposefully damage private property. This is a civil matter now, Mr. Thorne, and it is about to become a Class A felony matter." Leo felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, but his voice remained steady. "My actions were defensive. They were a direct, proportional response to a 2-day-long invasion. Destruction of my property, and criminal trespass, all of which I reported to every authority who ignored me." Kincaid smiled, a tight, professional gesture that never reached her eyes. "Proportional is not a word the court will use when they see the repair bill for the McLaren. But we aren't here to argue your motivations. We are here to talk consequences." She held up the document. "This is a notice of intent to sue. Sterling Development is filing for $15 million in damages for business interruption and slander. More importantly, I have a preliminary filing here from the owners of the 45 vehicles, consolidating their individual claims for theft of use and vehicle damage. They are naming you personally in a joint $6.3 million liability suit." Leo's breath hitched. He had envisioned a civil suit for the gravel. He had not envisioned a consortium of wealthy executives uniting to crush him financially. $6.3 million? It was an astronomical, impossible number. Kincaid leaned closer to the door. "You cannot afford the retainer for a lawyer who can even read that document, let alone fight it. We will bankrupt you. We will take your house, your savings, your future pension. We will seize the profits from the book deal you're about to sign with your little trench warrior story, and we will do it all before the end of the year." She paused, letting the silence and the sheer scale of the threat settle. "Our offer, before we file at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, is simple. You sign this document, which is an affidavit stating that your actions were not about the easement, but were a deliberate, malicious act of revenge due to a mental health episode triggered by the construction noise. You agree to sign over the deed to this property for a sum of $250,000, far below market value, but enough to clear your mortgage. We drop all lawsuits, civil and criminal. You walk away with nothing but your life, and we start removing those ridiculous ditches and those 45 cars tomorrow. Vance was staring at the ground, unable to meet Leo's eye. Kincaid, however, was studying Leo's face, waiting for the flicker of panic. "So, Mr. Thorne," Kincaid concluded, her voice softening into a cruel imitation of sympathy. "Did you dig the trenches to save the sewer line or to save yourself? It's time to choose the lesser of two ruinous evils." Leo looked past Kincaid and Vance, out to his ruined yard, now wrapped in police tape, the silent cars staring back at him. His victory had been instantaneous, physical, and exhilarating. The retaliation was slow, meticulous, and designed to vaporize him completely. He looked back at Kincaid, his face a hard, unreadable mask of exhaustion and resolve. "Give me until tomorrow morning," Leo said, his voice quiet but firm. "The cars are still on my property. They are currently acting as collateral in a dispute over uncompensated use of private land. I'm charging $10,000 per car, per day, for storage, effective Sunday morning. That's $450,000 a day. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. After that, I double the rate and I will hire a contractor to fill the trenches with concrete." Kincaid's composed smile vanished. Her eyes flashed with genuine shock. "You wouldn't dare. That would be permanent, catastrophic damage." "You paved my yard permanently and catastrophically, Attorney Kincaid," Leo shot back. "You told me to name my price. $10,000 a day is my price for inconvenience. And if they remain past tomorrow's deadline, I'm building a flower garden around them, using quick-setting cement as the base. That will make your $6.3 million suit look like petty change. You want your house back, Mr. Sterling? Then start paying rent." He slowly, deliberately shut the door, leaving the two corporate agents standing in shocked silence on his front porch. Leo leaned. The heavy silence of Monday night was worse than the roar of the trencher. Leo Thorne sat at his kitchen table, the light off, staring through the grimy window at the yellow police tape that fluttered faintly in the breeze. The barricades were set up at the head of the driveway, forcing the Sterling executives, the few who dared to come back, to park blocks away and walk. The 45 cars sat like cold, metallic boulders, accumulating debt. By the time the 9 a.m. Tuesday deadline arrived, Leo would be owed $900,000 in accumulated storage fees. His phone, an old, reliable burner, rang at exactly 1:17 a.m. The caller ID was blocked. Leo picked up on the third ring. "Thorne, Mr. Thorne, it's Alara Kincaid. I hope I didn't wake you. Though I imagine sleep is difficult when you've taken on a $15 billion development firm." Her voice was tight, without any of the condescending amusement of the afternoon. She sounded genuinely stressed. "I'm awake, Attorney Kincaid. You have less than 8 hours to wire $900,000 into my escrow account, or the daily rate doubles to $900,000, and I arrange for the cement pour." "You are not listening to the scale of this problem. Mr. Thorne, Desmond Sterling III is not paying you a cent. He views this as extortion and he will not be blackmailed. That money is already allocated to the team of investigators we now have assigned to your life story." "My life story is boring, Attorney Kincaid. I pay my taxes and I don't violate municipal codes." Kincaid's voice dropped, becoming dangerously low and intimate. "Don't be naive. Everyone has a fault line, Leo. Yours, I hear, is named Sarah. She works as a teacher in the East District. Her car broke down last week. I'm sure she'd appreciate not dealing with any unforeseen complications while walking home late from grading papers. Are you familiar with the term personal liability, Mr. Thorne? That $6.3 million liability suit we threatened is only the beginning. We can make your entire life a series of audits, lawsuits, and unfortunate accidents that have nothing to do with me, Sterling, or your silly trenches." The mention of Sarah, his sister, a person entirely unrelated to this war, was a cold, effective poison. Leo's hand clenched around the phone, his knuckles turning white. "You threaten my family!" "And I call the police with a recording of this conversation." "Kincaid!" Leo hissed. "Do it! she challenged instantly, and watch the police file it under unsubstantiated threat while a judge grants us an immediate emergency order to seize the vehicles based on credible threats of permanent destruction of private property, thus entirely bypassing the public works order. This is a game of political and financial leverage, Leo. We don't play fair. Our final offer is $400,000 for the house, all lawsuits dropped, and a non-disclosure agreement. Sign the papers we left on your porch by 8:08 a.m. or we unleash the dogs. She hung up, leaving Leo alone with the ringing silence and the chilling thought of Sarah walking home alone. The emotional stakes had just rocketed past property damage and into a realm of genuine personal danger. At 7:30 a.m. Tuesday, the political counterattack began. Janice Halliday, the director of public works, stood in the sterile, fluorescent-lit office of City Councilman Harrison, her spine rigid with professional defiance. Harrison, a man whose campaign coffers were notoriously heavy with sterling development money, was pacing, sweating through his expensive shirt. Janice, "You have to lift the stop work order," Harrison pleaded, his voice cracking with anxiety. "The bank financing the tower is calling the mayor. They can't afford this stoppage. We're talking millions a day in penalties. Sterling is threatening to pull the entire project out of Willow Creek, costing us 2,000 jobs." Halliday slammed her hand down on his mahogany desk. "That is political noise, Harrison. What I have is a documented, exposed, illegally obstructed municipal storm drain. That is a federal environmental concern because it connects directly to the river system. If I lift that order or allow those cars to be moved, which requires heavy equipment that could rupture the pipe and cause a toxic backup, I am personally liable for environmental criminal negligence. And so are you. Leo Thorne is an eccentric, but he exposed a massive documented crime. My hands are tied by law, not by choice." Harrison ran a hand over his face. "But the cars. The executives are furious. Sterling needs those cars moved to prove they have control over the site." "They have no control," Halliday stated flatly. "The cars stay until Sterling submits a complete city-approved rerouting and remediation plan for the drain. We need to cut open the lot, replace the damaged section, and ensure no further collapse. That is weeks of work. Sterling created this mess, and they will clean it up under my supervision. The only person who can allow the cars to be moved right now is Mr. Thorne, and he wants $10,000 per car per day. Maybe Sterling should pay the ransom, Harrison. It's cheaper than the environmental fines coming their way." Meanwhile, the psychological pressure on Leo intensified. At 8:00 a.m., a flatbed truck conspicuously parked across the street. Two large, clean-cut men in dark, nondescript jackets got out. They were not police or Sterling employees. They were professional intimidation. They stood next to the flatbed, staring silently at Leo's house, their hands in their pockets. Leo, fighting the urge to check on Sarah, held his position. He made a large, exaggerated show of carrying tools out to his front porch, a shovel, a rake, and a bag of quick-setting concrete mix. He began mixing a small amount of the cement in a 5-gallon bucket, the low scraping sound of the shovel against the plastic a declaration. At 8:45 a.m., Kincaid called one last time. "Leo, it's 8:45. The affidavit is on your porch. Last chance. $400,000. Take the money. Walk away. We know about your sister, Kincaid," Leo said, his voice hard. "I am not signing your lie. The deadline is 9 a.m. You are now responsible for $900,000 in debt, and I am about to pour concrete." He hung up the phone and walked out onto the front porch, the bucket of wet cement heavy in his hand. He looked across the street at the two silent enforcers. He walked up to the police tape, stopping at the edge of the first trench, the one that had imprisoned Desmond Sterling's shattered McLaren. Just as he reached the trench, a massive diesel engine roared to life on the far side of his property, near the overgrown alley that bordered the Sterling Tower site. It was a noise heavier than the trencher, a noise that spoke of immense, unstoppable lifting power. A colossal green mobile construction crane swung into view, its multi-section boom extending over the 6-foot temporary security fence, separating Leo's backyard from the main construction site. The crane was not marked with the Sterling logo, but with the neutral branding of Apex Rigging Solutions. They weren't paying the ransom. They were executing an illegal extraction. Two men in apex rigging hard hats, ignoring the police tape, quickly moved from the tower side onto Leo's property. They carried specialized rigging straps and a long, insulated cable. Their goal was clear: sneak the crane in, lift the most valuable cars, starting with the McLaren, clear the trench, and drop them on the Sterling side, thus nullifying Leo's leverage before the city could react. The foreman, a heavy-set man with a radio clipped to his shoulder, saw Leo standing near the McLaren and shouted, "Private operation, buddy! Emergency hazard removal! Stand clear of the rigging zone!" Leo dropped the bucket of wet cement. It landed with a heavy thud on the gravel. He ran to his shed, retrieving the one thing he knew they couldn't ignore: the broken piece of the 1958 storm drain pipe. He ran back to the McLaren, holding the pipe aloft like a jagged clay trophy. The Apex crew had already attached the straps to the undercarriage of the yellow supercar. The crane operator, taking instructions from the foreman, began to lift the boom. The cables tightened with a high-pitched whine. The McLaren, still nose down from the crash, began to groan, its weight swinging slightly. Leo knew the city had placed a hold on all activity because of the exposed drain. If this heavy, swinging load moved too much weight, it could cause the fragile, cracked pipe segment underneath the lot to shear, triggering the exact environmental disaster Halliday was terrified of. Leo pulled his phone, frantically calling the Public Works emergency line. "This is Leo Thorne, homeowner at Willow Creek. Sterling Development is illegally trying to remove the seized vehicles with a heavy crane. The crane's weight and vibration are directly over the exposed 1958 storm drain, the one they violated. They are risking a catastrophic rupture. You need to send Director Halliday now, or I call the State Environmental Agency and tell them you allowed an active breach." The message hit the right panic button. On the other end, the dispatcher's voice turned shrill. "Stay on the line, Mr. Thorne. Do not approach the crane. Do not interfere." The McLaren was now 6 feet in the air, swinging slightly over the trenches. The Apex foreman grinned, victorious. "Too late, trench warrior. We've got the car! You can't stop us all!" Just as the foreman signaled the crane operator to swing the boom toward the Sterling property, a blinding flash of silver raced into the frame from the main street. It was an unmarked police car, followed by Janice Halliday's Public Works truck, siren wailing in a frustrated, high-pitched scream. Halliday jumped out of her truck before it stopped moving. She ran to the foreman, pointing a furious finger at the swinging car. "Apex rigging! I am Janice Halliday, director of Willow Creek Public Works. Drop the car! This site is under a municipal stop work order. You are..." Wednesday dawned clear and sharp, a perfect day for a reckoning. The debt owed by Sterling Development to Leo Thorne was now $1.8 million, growing at $900,000 a day. The corporation was paralyzed, hemorrhaging millions in business interruption fees, facing a massive environmental fine from the city, and having just had their illegal crane operation shut down and impounded. The media frenzy was blinding. Sterling's stock was down 7 points. At 10 a.m., a sleek black helicopter, marked only with a stylized silver S, settled onto the rooftop landing pad of the Sterling Tower. Minutes later, Desmond Sterling III, accompanied by the grim-faced Elara Kincaid and a thoroughly broken Marcus Vance, emerged from the tower lobby. Sterling was not wearing the suit from the crash. He was wearing an entirely new suit, but his face was an old landscape of fury and exhaustion. He ignored the handful of reporters who immediately started shouting questions and strode directly to the perimeter tape of Leo's yard. Leo was sitting on his front porch steps, calmly drinking coffee. He wore a fresh shirt, but his jeans were still dusted with fine gray powder. Sterling stopped 5 feet from the caution tape, his eyes locking onto Leo's. The hatred between them was a palpable, almost electrical charge. "Thorne," Sterling began, his voice low, shaking with suppressed rage. "This farce ends now. My firm is facing a liquidity crisis because of your maniacal criminal stunts. I will not have my reputation destroyed by a disgruntled, dirt-digging hermit. You destroyed your own reputation when you chose to pave over a critical public utility for profit." "Mr. Sterling," Leo replied, setting his coffee mug down, "you destroyed my property and threatened my family. And now, You owe me $1.8 million with the meter running. Kincaid stepped forward, the picture of professional defeat. Mr. Thorne, be reasonable. We will issue you a check for $400,000 for the property, and we will waive the $6.3 million liability suit. Take the win. This is over. The time for $400,000 is over, Attorney Kincaid, Leo said, standing up. He looked past her, directly at Marcus Vance, who wouldn't meet his eyes. The time for legal fees is over. Now we are talking about justice and the cost of violating a man's home. Sterling's voice rose, cracking the smooth executive veneer. You listen to me, you pathetic little man? That money is leverage. You think I won't find a judge to break your absurd rental fee? You think I can't put you in prison? You think $1.8 million matters to me? I will pay you, but I will make your life a living hell until the day you die. Leo walked to the police tape, placing one hand on the cold, yellow plastic. He looked at Sterling, and his voice, though quiet, was heavy with finality. It does matter to you. Because it's not $1.8 million you're losing. It's control. You want to know the price, Desmond? I'll give you the price. It's non-negotiable. He looked at Kincaid. You threatened my sister, Sarah. Tell your client that every single negotiation from this moment forward is rooted in that threat. The money, as you said, is just a tool. But I won't take your money. I want dirt, Sterling frowned. Dirt? What the hell are you talking about? Leo pointed to the corner of the Sterling Tower construction site, the section that bordered his backyard and contained the illegally paved sewer line. It was prime real estate meant for a future retail pavilion. You're going to immediately and permanently deed that entire corner parcel of land, the one where the easement runs. Approximately 1 acre, to the city of Willow Creek, Leo declared. The deed must stipulate that the land is forever restricted to one purpose, a municipal urban park and green space dedicated to the preservation of the Willow Creek watershed. You will pay for the initial landscaping, benches, and saplings. You will never build on it. You will never profit from it. You will turn the site of your crime into a public garden. Sterling's face went scarlet. Losing the corner lot would cost millions in long-term revenue and destroy the architectural integrity of his flagship tower design. I won't do it, Sterling roared. That's blackmail. That's half a city block. It is the cost of my sister's safety, Leo countered, his voice cutting like glass. Refuse, and not only do I pour the concrete, but I release the recording of your lawyer threatening my family directly to Channel 12, the state environmental agency, and the district attorney's office. You'll be fighting an environmental felony, a civil suit, and a political nightmare all at once. The bank will pull your financing. You will lose the tower anyway. But this way, you lose the land to nature, not to ruin. Kincaid stepped forward, her voice low and frantic, pulling Sterling by the sleeve toward the shadow of the nearby utility box. She hissed arguments at him, citing environmental law, fiduciary duty, and the immediate impact on stock prices. After 2 minutes, Sterling turned back. His face was a mask of utter defeat. Fine, Sterling bit out, the single word dripping with acidic resentment. The land is yours, but the cars come out today, and you sign an agreement right now absolving us of all liability for the trenches, the pavement, and all costs related to this dispute. I'll sign the agreement, but there's one more condition for the car removal, Leo stated, looking past Sterling toward Marcus Vance. Vance, who had been trying to shrink into Kincaid's shadow, stiffened. The cars are on my property. They can't be removed by heavy machinery due to the compromised sewer pipe, Leo continued. Therefore, they must be removed manually. Mr. Vance, as the site foreman who first paved over my yard, you will personally supervise the extraction. You and your crew will use planks, rollers, jacks, and shovels to manually bridge the trenches and move every single one of those 45 vehicles off my property and onto the street. You will start with the heaviest SUVs and end with Mr. Sterling's McLaren. The extraction will take all day, and you will do it under the direct supervision of Public Works Director Halliday and myself. Vance finally looked up, his jaw dropping in disbelief. Manual labor for 45 trapped vehicles in front of the world media? It was the ultimate career-ending humiliation. Sterling laughed, a high, manic sound of pure disbelief. You petty, spiteful little bastard. You're making him shovel dirt for a day? What does that gain you? It gains me my peace, Desmond, Leo said, calm and final. It teaches you that some boundaries are set by the earth, not by money. And it teaches Mr. Vance that private property is not a convenience to be paved over. By noon, the deal was signed. Sterling Development filed the paperwork deeding the land to the city, and the construction crew, looking miserable and exhausted, began the humiliating, painstaking work of freeing the cars. Marcus Vance was the picture of shattered authority. Sweat plastered his yellow vest to his back as he wrestled heavy planks into the trenches, his own hands shoveling the dirt he had once ordered dumped. Every rescued car dusted with Leo's gravel was a small public victory for the homeowner. The final act came at sunset. The McLaren, now even more wrecked, was the last car left. Vance had meticulously placed 3 layers of hardwood planks across the trench, a ramp of shame built by his own sweat. As the winch slowly pulled the yellow sports car up and over the final obstacle, freeing it from Leo's soil, the crowd of onlookers cheered, a spontaneous, public outpouring of support for the little guy who had fought back. The McLaren finally rolled free onto the street. Leo walked toward the empty space where the car had been trapped. Picking up the broken ceramic segment of the 1958 storm drain pipe, the piece he had held up to the news cameras, he looked at the small, devastated patch of ground, the heart of the conflict. He looked at Desmond Sterling III, who was standing across the street next to his ruined car, watching with defeated fury. With a final, satisfying grunt, Leo hurled the broken pipe like a javelin. It soared over the trench and landed squarely in the center of the newly emptied gravel space. It was a burial, the physical token of the corporate crime now resting forever in the ground they had coveted. Leo turned his back on the Sterling Tower, on the liberated cars, and on the receding figure of Desmond Sterling III. He walked toward his house, passing the initial crew that was already beginning to mark out the first tree plantings for the new Willow Creek Urban Park. His backyard was ruined. His nerves were frayed and he was nearly bankrupt, but his home was safe. He had fought the power not with money but with the earth itself. The next morning, the space where the McLaren had been trapped was the site of the first commemorative sapling, planted directly above the recovered storm drain, ensuring that the ground Sterling coveted would forever remain public, protected, and green.